All right, so good evening. Thanks to those of you who are taking the time to watch. I appreciate it. Welcome to our iPoli-Sci workshop on global conflict and cooperation. Again, this workshop is a series that's focused on defining, exploring, and discussing global conflict and cooperation from the point of view of different international institutions, country governments, and non-governmental organizations. We're in week 6, so we are going to be continuing with the Pacific. Now we're in the Pacific part 2, and obviously you're welcome to read recordings from prior weeks as well. And we have some recordings from the summer session as well, if you're interested in those. So let's go ahead and jump to the Pacific part 2. So recall from last week that we talked about the Pacific and setting up the history of the region and of historical conflict during World War II, and then of this kind of emerging sense of opportunities in the area or in this part of the world. Now, this week, our learning objectives with this workshop, again, are to define the Pacific region, so we're very clear about what it is, describe another example of conflict in it, and then describe another example of cooperation. So let's go ahead and take a look at what the Pacific entails. And here's an image that shows what the Pacific Rim region is. So obviously, in the eastern part, you have the Americas, North, Central, and South America. In the southwestern part, you have Australia. And then in the eastern part, you have the Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Hong Kong, and then China, North and South Korea, and Japan. And then in the north, we have the Bering Sea and parts of Russia. And then we have a range of the small island nations and countries strewn throughout, largely the South Pacific. So this is the Pacific, right? This is the next sphere, the next area of great attention, I think, for the world. So first, I like to focus on the cooperative part as opposed to conflict, because this cooperative part is beginning to cause, at least in some people's views, the seeds of conflict for the future. So this is an image of the Prime Minister of Australia, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and the President of the United States talking about a national security initiative that was launched. So let me go ahead and open that link. And this was just about a week ago when the president delivered these remarks. So we'll go ahead and listen to a good chunk of this.
Was joined by Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison and UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson via video conference today to announce a new Indo-Pacific trilateral partnership called AU-KUS between the three countries to address security threats in the region. This is about 15 minutes.
Hey, Boris.
Good morning from Australia. I'm very pleased to join two great friends of freedom and of Australia, Prime Minister Johnson and President Biden. Today, we join our nations in a next generation partnership built on a strong foundation of proven trust. We have always seen the world through a similar lens. We've always believed in a world that favours freedom, that respects human dignity, the rule of law, the independence of sovereign states, and the peaceful fellowship of nations. And while we've always looked to each other to do what we believe is right, we have never left at each other. Always together, never alone. Our world is becoming more complex, especially here in our region, the Indo-Pacific. This affects us all. The future of the Indo-Pacific will impact all our futures. To meet these challenges, to help deliver the security and stability our region needs, we must now take our partnership to a new level. A partnership that seeks to engage, not to exclude, to contribute, not take, and to enable and empower, not to control or coerce. And so, friends, AUKUS is born, a new enhanced trilateral security partnership between Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States. AUKUS, a partnership where our technology, our scientists, our industry, our defence forces are all working together to deliver a safer and more secure region that ultimately benefits all. AUKUS will also enhance our contribution to our growing network of partnerships in the Indo-Pacific region. ANZUS, our ASEAN friends, our bilateral strategic partners, the Quad, Five Eyes countries, and of course our dear Pacific family. The first major initiative of AUKUS will be to deliver a nuclear-powered submarine fleet for Australia. Over the next 18 months, we will work together to seek to determine the best way forward to achieve this. This will include an intense examination of what we need to do to exercise our nuclear stewardship responsibilities here in Australia. We intend to build these submarines in Adelaide, Australia, in close cooperation with the United Kingdom and the United States. But let me be clear, Australia is not seeking to acquire nuclear weapons or establish a civil nuclear capability. And we will continue to meet all our nuclear non-proliferation obligations. Australia has a long history of defence cooperation with the United States and the United Kingdom. For more than a century, we have stood together for the cause of peace and freedom, motivated by the beliefs we share, sustained by the bonds of friendship we have forged, enabled by the sacrifice of those who have gone before us, and inspired by our shared hope for those who will follow us. And so today, friends, we recommit ourselves to this cause and a new AUKUS vision.
I'm delighted to join President Biden and Prime Minister Morrison to announce that the United Kingdom, Australia, and the United States are creating a new trilateral defence partnership known as AUKUS, with the aim of working hand in glove to preserve security and stability in the Indo-Pacific. We're opening a new chapter in our friendship, and the first task of this partnership will be to help Australia acquire a fleet of nuclear-powered submarines, emphasising, of course, that the submarines in question will be powered by nuclear reactors, not armed with nuclear weapons. And our work will be fully in line with our non-proliferation obligations. This will be one of the most complex and technically demanding projects in the world, lasting for decades and requiring the most advanced technology. It will draw on the expertise that the UK has acquired over generations, dating back to the launch of the Royal Navy's first nuclear submarine over 60 years ago. And together with the other opportunities from AUKUS, creating hundreds of highly skilled jobs across the United Kingdom, including in Scotland, the north of England, and the Midlands, taking forward this government's driving purpose of levelling up across the whole country. We will have a new opportunity to reinforce Britain's place at the leading edge of science and technology, strengthening our national expertise, and perhaps most significantly, the UK, Australia, and the US will be joined even more closely together, reflecting the measure of trust between us, the depth of our friendship, and the enduring strength of our shared values of freedom and democracy. Only a handful of countries possess nuclear-powered submarines, and it is a momentous decision for any nation to acquire this formidable capability, and perhaps equally momentous for any other state to come to its aid. But Australia is one of our oldest friends, a kindred nation, and a fellow democracy, and a natural partner in this enterprise. Now the UK will embark on this project alongside our allies, making the world safer and generating jobs across our United Kingdom. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Boris. And I want to thank that fellow down under. Thank you very much, pal. Appreciate it, Mr. Prime Minister. I'm honored today to be joined by two of America's closest allies, Australia and the United Kingdom, to launch a new phase of the trilateral security cooperation among our countries. As Prime Minister Morrison and Prime Minister Johnson said, I want to thank you for this partnership, your vision as we embark together on this strategic mission. Although Australia, the UK, and US partnership, AUKUS, It sounds strange and all these acronyms, but it's a good one. AUKUS, our nations will update and enhance our shared ability to take on the threats of the 21st century, just as we did in the 20th century, together. Our nations and our brave fighting forces have stood shoulder to shoulder for literally more than 100 years. Through the trench fighting in World War I, the island hopping in World War II during the frigid winters in Korea, and the scorching heat of the Persian Gulf. The United States, Australia, and the United Kingdom have long been faithful and capable partners, and we're even closer today. Today, we're taking another historic step to deepen and formalize cooperation among all three of our nations, because we all recognize the imperative of ensuring peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific over the long term. We need to be able to address both the current strategic environment in the region and how it may evolve, because the future of each of our nations, and indeed the world, depends on a free and open Indo-Pacific enduring and flourishing in the decades ahead. This is about investing in our greatest source of strength, our alliances, and updating them to better meet the threats of today and tomorrow. It's about connecting America's existing allies and partners in new ways and amplifying our ability to collaborate, recognizing there is no regional divide separating the interests of our Atlantic and Pacific partners. Indeed, this effort reflects the broader trend of key European countries playing an extremely important role in the Indo-Pacific. France, in particular, already has substantial Indo-Pacific presence and is a key partner and ally in strengthening the security and prosperity of the region. The United States looks forward to working closely with France and other key countries as we go forward. And finally, this initiative is about making sure that each of us has a modern capability, the most modern capabilities we need to maneuver and defend against rapidly evolving threats. AUKUS will bring together our sailors, our scientists, and our industries to maintain and expand our edge and military capabilities and critical technologies such as cyber, artificial intelligence, quantum technologies, and undersea domains. Now, as a key project under AUKUS, we are launching consultations with Australia's acquisition of conventionally armed nuclear-powered submarines for its Navy, conventionally armed. I want to be exceedingly clear about this. We're not talking about nuclear-armed submarines. These are conventionally armed submarines that are powered by nuclear reactors. This technology is proven, it's safe. And the United States and the UK have been operating nuclear-powered submarines for decades. I have asked Secretary Austin of the Department of Defense to lead this effort for the U.S. government in close collaboration with the Department of Energy and the Department of State. Our governments will now launch an 18-month consultation period to determine every element of this program, from workforce to training requirements to production timelines to safeguards and non-proliferation measures, and to nuclear stewardship and safety to ensure full compliance with each of our nation's commitments under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. We'll all undertake this effort in a way that reflects the long-standing leadership in global non-proliferation and rigorous verification standards, in partnership and consultation with the International Atomic Energy Agency. So I want to thank the Prime Minister Morrison and Prime Minister Johnson for their friendship, but mostly important for their leadership and partnership as we undertake this new phase of our security cooperation. And the United States will also continue to work with ASEAN and the Quad, as was stated earlier, our 5 treaty allies and other close partners in the Indo-Pacific, as well as allies and partners in Europe and around the world to maintain a free and open Indo-Pacific and build a future of peace, opportunity for all the people of the region. We're joining together, partnerships are getting stronger. This is what we're about. I want to thank you all, and I look forward to seeing both of you in person very soon, I hope. Thank you. Thank you.
So there you have it in full. The remarks by Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, and President Biden of the United States about this new national security initiative between the 3 countries this is one of the most significant developments in American foreign policy in the past 10 years, if not since the end of the Cold War back in the late 80s and early 90s. And the reason I say that is because it is a very meaningful step for any country, particularly the United States and the United Kingdom, to be willing to share the advanced technologies around naval forces, and in this case, nuclear powered submarines. That's not taken lightly, and it shouldn't be taken lightly. And so this is an example of a very strong example of cooperation between countries, right? The willingness to share this type of advanced technology with each other and to then deploy it where and when it's needed in the region and around the world. Now, with that cooperation, right, for some, they argue that that's the seeds of conflict. So when it comes to conflict, I want to highlight this article in the Washington Post. It says China accuses new U.S.-Australian submarine deal stoking arms race, threatening regional peace. So let's go and open up that article and let's listen in to this one. So we'll go ahead and have this read aloud to us.
China on Thursday slammed a decision by the United States and Britain to share sensitive nuclear submarine technology with Australia, a move seen as a direct challenge to Beijing and its growing military ambitions. After President Biden's announcement on Wednesday of a new defense alliance, to be known as AUKUS, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian described the agreement as extremely irresponsible, while Chinese state media warned Australia that it was now an adversary of China and should prepare for the worst. At a regular news briefing in Beijing, Zhao said the alliance seriously undermined regional peace and stability, aggravated the arms race, and hurt international non-proliferation efforts. U.S. will share nuclear submarine technology with Australia as part of new alliance, a direct challenge to China. He accused the United States and Britain of double standards and using nuclear exports as a tool in their geopolitical games, as he admonished them to abandon their outdated Cold War mentality, a common refrain from ministry spokespeople. Otherwise, they will only shoot themselves in the foot, he added. While Biden, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison did not mention China in their remarks on Wednesday, the pact is widely seen as a response to China's expanding economic power, military reach, and diplomatic influence. China is believed to have 6 nuclear attack submarines, with plans to increase the fleet in the next decade. Beijing will view this as part of the Biden administration's effort to build coalitions to hem China in and contain its rising power, said Bonnie Glaser, director of the German Marshall Fund's Asia program. The agreement, which comes soon after the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan, is part of a broader effort by Biden to focus on the Indo-Pacific region and recruit allies to counter what his administration sees as an increasingly militant and authoritarian China. Under the Biden administration, Washington and Beijing have clashed over human rights, trade, the South China Sea, and Taiwan. As the United States attempts to engage China on climate pledges ahead of a key international summit in November, there have been few signs of progress. A 90-minute call between Chinese President Xi Jinping and Biden last week resulted in few specifics. During the call, Xi said U.S. policies have caused serious difficulties in the relationship, according to the official Xinhua news agency. Glaser said she expects Beijing to exert more pressure on Australia and the United Kingdom to deter others from banding together against China. In Chinese, that's killing the chicken to scare the monkey, she said. On Thursday, the state-run Global Times described the United States as losing its mind trying to rally its allies against China and accused Australia of becoming a running dog of Washington. China and Australia have been locked in a trade war for more than a year as relations have deteriorated. Since Australia has become an anti-China spearhead, the country should prepare for the worst, the editorial warned. Others say Beijing has little recourse to pressure those involved in the alliance. There is not a lot they can do in material terms because the relationship with the U.S. is already at rock bottom. They have already imposed sanctions on Australia and threatened it so much that their bullying tactics have proven to be counterproductive, said Christopher Hughes, a professor of international relations at the London School of Economics and Political Science, focusing on Chinese foreign policy. According to Hughes, while the new alliance is likely to fan already high anti-Western nationalism in China, it could also add fuel to growing concerns inside China over Xi's expanding crackdown on the private sector and society and a weakening economy. If they are wise, they will realize that this alignment is the result of their own assertiveness and change tack, he said. China does not have a lot of cards to play.
And so you hear an overview of the reaction from the Chinese government and Chinese state media about this new defensive pact, or this agreement between the three countries of the Australia, United States, and United Kingdom. Now, as you hear the language, right, you can see those as seeds of potential conflict. And so it's important to note that when it comes to like this long history of politics and war and of conflict and of pressure, and of all the other things that are enveloped in that, is that it's an ebb and flow, right? That one thing may be viewed as good, and then in another person's perspective, in this case, another country's perspective, may not be viewed as good, if not bad. And so this is a part of the dynamic of American foreign policy that we are starting to begin to live through. And for those of us who are a little bit older, we've seen the end of a conflict in the Middle East, the first Gulf War. For those of us who are older than that, obviously our veterans from World War II and Vietnam, they've seen this kind of arc of our country's history for much longer. For those of you who are a little younger, right, that may not remember 9/11 and the launch of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and now the end of the war in Afghanistan. This is a new phase in American foreign policy, and so I just want to emphasize like how deeply important this is to be informed of, engaged with, and cognizant of as you go forward in your life and in what you see the country doing and what the world community is doing as well. All right, the last thing I'd like to point out is the implications of all this. And I'll leave this here for you to engage with, but know that there's an article about France's reaction. You might be asking, well, why is France even in the middle of this? I thought this was Australia, the UK, and the United States. Well, because Australia had an agreement with the government of France to purchase diesel-powered submarines from them. And that deal basically has fallen through. And the French government's reaction has been very visceral and very strongly worded over the past week. And the expectation is like, how does the United States keep that balance with another ally in the other part of the world across the Atlantic? So there are implications to any of these kinds of big decisions. My sense of it all is that, this will get worked through over the next months or years with France. But in the purest sense, right, every country, when they're thinking about global conflict and cooperation, they're thinking about their national interest. And while that national interest is defined by its leaders at the time, when those leaders make those decisions, typically the next leader and the next leader will continue that effort, because it's going to be a part of the shared understanding of what a country's national interest is. So again, this is a very meaningful moment in our U.S. foreign policy, in our relations with countries around the world. And we're just going to have to see, how this all shapes up. So hopefully this gives you a lot of food for thought. We can go ahead and get into the discussion. And thank you for your time. So take care and have a great night.